Joey Bishop spent his entire life making other people laugh, but he rarely allowed the world to see what lived behind the jokes. For decades, he stood inches away from fame, power, and legend, yet always seemed slightly outside the frame. When his final interview surfaced near the end of his life, it didn't explode with scandal or confession, but it quietly confirmed something audiences had sensed all along. Joey Bishop had been carrying a complicated truth about success, loyalty, and regret, and he had waited until the very end to stop deflecting it with humor. A comedian born from hardship. Joey Bishop was born Joseph Abraham Goddell on February 3, 1918, in the Bronx, into a Jewish immigrant family defined by hard work and constant scarcity. His father repaired bicycles, his mother held the home together, and money was always tight. As an infant, Joey moved with his family to South Philadelphia, a world of row houses and crowded streets where humor wasn't entertainment, it was survival. There, surrounded by teasing neighbors and shared struggle, he learned early that laughter could soften even the harshest realities. He later joked that his family was so poor we couldn't even afford to pay attention, a line that carried more truth than exaggeration. School never suited him, and he dropped out as a teenager to help support the family, taking any job he could, including waiting tables. What came naturally was observation. Joey watched how people complained, disguised disappointment with sarcasm, and turned frustration into jokes. His humor was never loud or physical. It was dry, restrained, and delivered with a straight face that made it land harder. He honed that style in unforgiving clubs in Philadelphia and New York, places where silence was immediate punishment for a bad joke. Those rooms taught him discipline, timing, and how to read a crowd without panic. Slowly, he realized comedy wasn't just something he did, it was who he was. "I didn't choose comedy," he once said. "Comedy chose me." At the time, it barely paid. National exposure followed with appearances on shows like The Ed Sullivan Show, but everything changed when Frank Sinatra saw him perform. Sinatra recognized a rare quality, a comedian who didn't fight for attention, but quietly controlled it. He invited Joey to open at major venues, including the Copacabana in New York. One night, when Marilyn Monroe arrived late in a white ermine coat, Joey glanced at her and said, "I told you to sit in the truck." The room erupted, not from cruelty but from perfect timing and fearless humanity. Inside the Rat Pack, always slightly outside. By the time Joey Bishop entered Frank Sinatra's inner circle, he had already spent years refining his craft in obscurity. That experience mattered. As the Rat Pack formed, Joey understood structure in a way the others didn't need to. Sinatra was pure magnetism, Dean Martin effortless charm, Sammy Davis Jr. explosive energy. Joey was the balance, the straight man who quietly held the chaos together. On stage in Las Vegas, the shows felt wild and unpredictable, especially at the Sands Hotel. But much of that spontaneity was engineered. Joey shaped the banter, wrote jokes, and redirected moments when the energy threatened to unravel. While Sinatra commanded and Martin drifted, Joey listened, waited, and reset the rhythm with a single perfectly timed line. The group peaked during the engagement known as The Summit. By day, they filmed Ocean's 11. By night, they delivered 2 shows packed with music, insults, and controlled disorder. Those nights transformed Las Vegas into America's entertainment capital. Joey was central to the act, yet rarely foregrounded. Audiences laughed because of him, often without realizing it. Offstage, Joey stood apart. He didn't drink heavily or chase excess. While the others embraced chaos, he stayed clear-headed, joking that he was the only one in the Rat Pack with a curfew. Control and stability mattered to him, but that restraint also set him at a quiet distance from the group's growing myth. Joey believed he belonged, and he did. Sinatra once called him the hub of the wheel, acknowledging his importance. But over time, histories minimized his role. His name appeared less often, his contributions reduced. Still, opportunity followed. He appeared in films with the group, launched The Joey Bishop Show, and became a frequent guest host on The Tonight Show. From the outside, it looked like success. Inside, Joey was already sensing how easily he could be overlooked. The moment. Everything broke. The breaking point did not arrive with shouting on stage or a public betrayal. It came quietly, through a phone call, and it changed Joey Bishop's life forever. Frank Sinatra owned part of a resort called the Cal Neva Lodge, a place where loyalty mattered as much as talent. When Sinatra needed someone to fill in for him on certain dates, he turned to Joey. To Sinatra, the request was simple. To Joey, it felt like a reckoning. By then, Joey had spent years standing in the shadow of bigger names while doing the work that kept the machine running. He had watched others receive praise while he absorbed pressure. So when the offer came, he did something unthinkable in Sinatra's world. He negotiated. Joey presented a list of demands, including a significant fee and a private jet. From Joey's perspective, it wasn't arrogance, it was self-respect, an attempt to finally assert his value after years of quiet contribution. Sinatra saw it differently. To him, Joey's rise had been facilitated, not negotiated. Loyalty was currency, and Joey's demands felt like betrayal. According to those close to the situation, Sinatra didn't argue. He didn't counteroffer. He hung up, and then he cut Joey off completely. The consequences were swift and devastating. Joey was removed from the Rat Pack's inner circle. Projects that once would have included him suddenly didn't. A role intended for Joey in Robin and the Seven Hoods went to another actor. At a major charity performance where Joey might once have hosted, Johnny Carson stood in his place. These weren't accidents, they were messages. For Joey, the loss wasn't just professional, it was existential. The Rat Pack had defined an era, and he had helped build it. Now he was being written out of his own history. He never publicly attacked Sinatra. He never told explosive stories, but the bitterness settled in quietly. In later interviews, he bristled when writers described him as someone who worked with the Rat Pack occasionally. "Occasionally," he once said, "I know I sound bitter, but I have a right to." What hurt most was not losing fame, it was losing acknowledgement. Joey believed he had been essential, not optional. He had brought order to chaos, timing to excess, intelligence to spectacle. And yet, without Sinatra's protection, his influence evaporated. Hollywood moved quickly, and Joey felt the doors close one by one. Late night, and the sound of being left behind. After being cut loose from the Rat Pack, Joey Bishop turned toward television with renewed determination. If he could no longer rely on the old circle, he would build something that belonged entirely to him. He had already proven he could command the medium. His sitcom, The Joey Bishop Show, had given him visibility, even if it never became a cultural juggernaut. But what Joey wanted next was not a supporting role. He wanted a seat at the table where power now lived, late-night television. In 1967, that opportunity finally arrived. ABC gave Joey his own late-night program, also titled The Joey Bishop Show. It was a bold move. Late night was already dominated by Johnny Carson, whose calm authority and massive audience loyalty made him nearly untouchable. Many had tried to compete with Carson. Most had failed. Joey knew the odds, but he also believed his approach was different enough to matter. His show leaned into conversation rather than spectacle. Joey didn't shout. He didn't perform exaggerated bits. He talked. He improvised. He let silences breathe. He brought Regis Philbin on as his sidekick, giving the young broadcaster his first national platform. Their chemistry was real and relaxed, and for a moment, it felt like something new was happening. Members of the Rat Pack occasionally appeared, though one absence was impossible to ignore. Frank Sinatra never showed up, not once. Ratings were never strong. Carson's audience stayed loyal, and network politics made access to major guests difficult. Still, Joey fought for attention. In one of the most controversial moments of the show, Regis Philbin walked off the stage during a live broadcast, claiming frustration with network pressure and self-doubt. The incident made headlines. Later, it was revealed to be a publicity stunt orchestrated by Joey himself. For a brief time, curiosity spiked. Viewers tuned in, but the momentum didn't last. By 1969, the show was canceled. For Joey, the loss cut deep. Late night had been his chance to redefine himself, to step out of Sinatra's shadow and prove he could stand alone. Instead, it became another reminder that the industry was moving on. Comedy was changing. A new generation was emerging, one that spoke more openly about anger, politics, addiction, and social fracture. Richard Pryor and George Carlin were reshaping what comedy could be. Joey's style, controlled, ironic, conversational, now felt restrained in a culture that wanted confrontation. He didn't adapt. Not because he couldn't, but because he wouldn't. Joey believed in timing, not shock. In implication, not confession. The world, however, wanted something louder. As the 70s moved forward, offers slowed. He guest-hosted when asked. He appeared occasionally. But the sense of centrality was gone. Joey Bishop was no longer shaping the room. He was filling space in it. The years, no one was watching. By the time Joey Bishop reached his 50s, the applause that once followed him from room to room had thinned out. The clubs were smaller now. The names on the marquee were younger. He found himself back where he had started decades earlier, nightclubs, only this time without the hunger of youth or the promise of ascent. The irony was cruel. At the height of his fame in the 60s, every young stand-up had wanted to be Joey Bishop. Now he was performing for audiences who barely remembered why his name once mattered. He kept working anyway. Joey had never believed in quitting, only in adjusting. He took occasional film roles, brief television appearances, anything that allowed him to stay connected to the craft without chasing relevance. He understood that comedy had moved on, but he refused to pretend he could be someone else. He believed subtlety still mattered, even if the world no longer rewarded it. At home, his life had always been quieter than the myth surrounding him. He had married Sylvia Russa long before fame arrived, and she remained his anchor through every rise and fall. While others in his circle lived publicly and destructively, Joey returned home. He didn't drink heavily. He didn't disappear into chaos. Sylvia managed the stability that made everything else possible. Friends often said she was the real center of his life, the person who absorbed the turbulence so he could stay composed. Their marriage lasted nearly 6 decades, a rarity in an industry built on spectacle and reinvention. When Sylvia died of cancer, something essential went with her. Joey rarely spoke about the loss in public, but those close to him saw the change immediately. Without her, he withdrew. Invitations went unanswered. Social appearances stopped. His Newport Beach home became a refuge, surrounded by trees and quiet. Exactly the kind of place he had once promised himself he would have if he ever escaped the row houses of Philadelphia. His relationship with his son Larry had always been respectful but emotionally restrained. Joey wasn't distant out of coldness. It was simply his nature. He mentored rather than hovered, advised without imposing. When Larry built his own career as an actor, writer, and director, Joey felt pride, but he never tried to claim ownership of it. He believed each person had to earn their path, just as he had. As the years passed, Joey became increasingly aware of how history was being written without him. Books about the Rat Pack minimized his presence. Articles reduced his role. Some described him as someone who worked with the group occasionally. That word haunted him. He had been there. He had done the work. Yet the narrative no longer needed him. Still, he refused the one thing that could have rewritten his legacy overnight. Publishers offered him millions to write a tell-all, to expose secrets, to betray trust. He turned every offer down. Loyalty mattered more than vindication. He believed that selling private stories would cheapen something sacred. Whatever resentment he carried, he would not trade it for money. The interview that said everything without saying it. Near the end of his life, Joey Bishop gave what would become his final interview. There was no dramatic setup, no attempt to rewrite history, no bitterness performed for effect. By then, his health was failing. At one point, he became too disoriented to continue speaking. But before that moment, he said enough. More than enough. What struck listeners was not what Joey revealed, but how he revealed it. He spoke slowly, thoughtfully, without the defensive humor that had protected him for decades. For the first time, he didn't rush to soften the truth with a punchline. He acknowledged the good fortune of his career, working with legends, standing on the biggest stages, making millions laugh. But alongside that pride, he allowed something else to surface. Not regret in the form of scandal or confession, but regret about timing, recognition, and choices that could not be undone. He admitted there were moments he wished he had handled differently, times when pride had collided with loyalty, moments when he wondered whether standing his ground had cost him more than it gained. He didn't name villains. He didn't accuse Frank Sinatra. He didn't blame Hollywood outright. Instead, he spoke like a man who had spent a lifetime thinking and had finally accepted that success is rarely clean. Joey confirmed what many had long suspected, that he had often felt overlooked, misunderstood, and quietly erased. He spoke about how painful it was to see his role minimized, to read histories where his presence barely registered. One guy wrote that I worked with the Rat Pack occasionally, he had said before. Occasionally. I have a right to be bitter. In the final interview, that bitterness softened, not because it disappeared, but because he no longer needed to defend it. He reflected on fame with surprising clarity. He admitted that celebrity was lonely, that being known by millions didn't protect him from isolation. He explained that while others thrived in the spotlight, he had always preferred distance. That choice, he acknowledged, may have cost him visibility, but it preserved something more important to him: control over who he was when the lights went out. When asked how he wanted to be remembered, Joey didn't hesitate. He didn't list achievements. He didn't mention the Rat Pack. He didn't point to television history or influence. He said simply that he hoped people would remember him as someone who made them laugh. That was all. Not because he lacked ambition, but because he had finally measured success differently. Do you think Joey Bishop was underestimated? Or did he choose a quieter kind of success? Was loyalty worth the price he paid for it? Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and if this story made you see him differently, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more untold Hollywood stories.